I'm recording my homily for the 21st Sunday at an Ordinary Time. And the part of the gospel that I want to focus on, that I focused on in my homily, was the interaction between Peter and Jesus. And I want to go just a little bit deeper with that. And I'm going to share a little bit just of my own take on that, but also some of my own growth in understanding the role of Peter as this rock for the church, okay? And how that applies to our own lives. When I was growing up, the church I attended was a massive church. The building, it sat about 2,000 people if you really packed it out. And it was a very modern church, so the walls were just bland, they were white, there was nothing on the walls, right? Just giant church with these giant white walls. And the only two statues in the church were Mary and Joseph, which is pretty common. You'll usually always have Mary and Joseph. The statues were very small for the size of the church. And so, practically speaking, I have to say, in that church, I didn't necessarily find tons of inspiration from images in the building. But when I would go visit my dad at his work, every day he would go to daily mass. And there was this little old church that he would attend. And he was a deacon, so he would assist at mass. And he'd go, and in this little old church, they had a ton of statues. I mean, they just lined the walls, and it was like you were in a Hall of Fame, Hall of Fame for the superhero saints. And I remember as a kid going through there and just being so impacted by just seeing these images of these people whom we honor and we look up to, and we pray for their intercession. And I didn't always know the significance of them, because I have to say I didn't know everything about these saints. But it was just so moving. You really felt like you were in the midst of greatness, because these were people who did it right. They really thrived in living their faith. A couple of years after I was ordained a priest friend gave me a statue. And it was really a surprise to me, because I can't say we were like the closest, we were like buddy as priest friends. I didn't know him that well. He's a very spiritual man, and so one day he sends me a statue, and the statue was about this big. I mean, it was really a big statue. And it was hand-carved. It was a wood statue made in Germany, probably worth a couple $1,000. And so it was a really incredible gift. And on top of that, it was a statue of St. John Vianney, who is the patron saint of parish priests. And the patron saint of parish priests, for us as parish priests, he's like Captain America. I mean, he's like the superhero. He was the one we all look up to. And so for him to give me that statue was just amazing. I remember when I got the statue, it's like, oh man, this is going right in my chapel. It's always going to be in my chapel. And, the day I die, it's going in my coffin with me. I mean, that's how I viewed this statue. Was always going to be with me. It was an amazing gift. A couple of years later, after I got the gift, I was praying in my chapel with the statue of St. John Vianney there. And I started getting this strange feeling, it wasn't like a voice, but it was just a feeling that I was supposed to give that statue to another priest friend of mine. And my first response to that, if this is the Holy Spirit, was, heck no, there's no way I'm giving up that statue. But the voice, if you will, the message, it didn't go away. Now the thing was, that day I was going to be meeting with that priest. So I was like, oh, all right, Lord, all right, if you want me to do this, So anyways, I met with the priest, and I was like, hey, I got this statue that I want to give you, but if you don't want it, that's great with me. So I showed him the statue, and he was like, wow, and so he obviously took the statue, and I was like, dang. But he took it, and it's amazing how I wonder if that's what happened with the priest who gave it to me. There was just this moment where he felt compelled to give it. It was really hard for me to give up that statue. So anyways, I gave up the statue, and he took it. And later that day, I'm having dinner with a group of priests. And so every Thursday, it was a group of these old priests, and I would have dinner with them. And so it was a really great time. Anyways, I'm having dinner with them, and after dinner, the pastor there, who has since deceased, is deceased, he says, Father Peter, I got something I've been meaning to give you for months, and I just kept forgetting. So I want to give it to you. I was like, oh, okay. So he comes out with a statue. This big statue. The statue is the exact same size as the one I had, but the statue's of St. Peter. Now, I was very honored. It was a movie, and I didn't know what to make of it. It's like that very day, I just given up, my beloved statue of St. John Vianney. And here he's giving me a statue. It's like this stand that I made specifically for St. John Vianney in my chapel was empty for a whole 3 or 4 hours before I had another statue to put there. So I brought the statue home, and it was great. But the thing was, I had to confront the fact that I actually really didn't respect St. Peter. I didn't have a lot of veneration for him. And here I was named after him, but to be quite honest, when I was growing up as a kid, I didn't like my name. I remember asking my mom one time if I could change my name. And she said no. But I wonder if when I got the statue, it was Jesus and St. Peter together working on my heart, because there was a lot of pride there. And I think, there's something different about St. Peter. Why did Jesus choose him? Why did Jesus choose Peter? Because to me, he wasn't the superhero. He wasn't Captain America. He wasn't Batman. He wasn't, the person that as kids we would look up to, as little boys we would look up to. He wasn't that superhero kind of guy. He always seemed like he was fumbling. He seemed like he was the average person. But even at that, growing up, I always felt like, did Jesus make a mistake? I mean, when you want to pick the CEO of an organization, of a massive organization or a potentially massive organization, would you pick Peter? Think about if you ran a big company and you're looking for the CEO, you're going to scour the earth looking for the best person in the world, right? You're going to sort through hundreds, if not thousands of resumes looking for that best person. But you look at Peter and it's like, Jesus didn't do that. In fact, if he did look through resumes, he did not pick the highest qualified person. And I wonder if there's the first lesson that I had to learn, and I'm still learning. And this is how Jesus operates. He's not going to pick you because you are the best in terms of your own personal talents or gifts. And the reason for that is because if you were ever to be rejected while using your greatest talents and gifts, you may be offended. You may want to take credit for everything that you're doing. You may say, yeah, I'm the best, And so when Jesus is working, he wants to be able to use your weaknesses. And he may even pick your worst weakness and say, that is what I'm going to use. That's going to be the driving force in your life. That is going to be the rock I'm going to build on. And so when Peter finally had completely turned and completely became that person whom Jesus built that church on, he was never going to be able to take credit for it. He was simply going to be able to turn to Jesus and say, Lord, it is all you. I simply said yes. That's all I did was I said yes. But that's all I could do. And so Peter was never going to be that superhero. He was simply going to be the rock. Now, when Jesus picked Peter, he obviously wasn't named Peter. His parents didn't name him Peter. They named him Simon. And so when he calls to Simon, he says, Simon, you are now Moses. Because Moses was a great leader, and so that's what you're going to be like. He didn't do that. He didn't say, Simon, you are now Abraham. Because Abraham was a great leader. He doesn't do that. He says, Simon, you are rock. He didn't even give him a name that we use as human beings. And so Peter, the word Peter, he wasn't even named Peter. He was named Rock. Kephas, or Cephas, depending what language, Greek or Aramaic. He named him a thing because that was going to be the simplicity of his role. He was simply going to be a rock. He was going to be that which Jesus could trust to build his church. Now, what is a rock? A rock is something strong and stable. If you've ever been to the cathedral in Mexico City, and I want to apologize in my homily, I misquoted. I said that the cathedral was a building that was leaning. It's not leaning. But the cathedral in Mexico City, near the Zócalo, in the center of the city, it's a building that is sinking. That's really what I meant to say. It's sinking. And so the building, just like all the buildings around there, were built on horrible soil for building because Mexico City was built on a dry lake bed. And so it was like sand, right? And so now they've had to go in and spend millions of dollars and use lots of modern engineering techniques to rebuild the foundation of the cathedral because it was sinking. The other day I went to, if you're hearing drumming, it's because our dance group is outside practicing their drumming and it's slightly distracting. Anyways, I went to do a house blessing the other day, and the reading that I love using in a house blessing is the reading of Jesus talking about building your house on rock, right? Don't build your house on sand, build your house on rock. And I think that's why he chose Peter, and that's why he named him Rock, is because that's what we need. You know, you look at all the other different religions in the world, and you know, the one thing that's often very different about us as Catholics than all the other religions is Jesus seemed to choose a structure for us because he knows as human beings we're so fallible, we're so shifty, no pun intended, right? And we're so easily swayed by our pride, and so we say, you know, I don't like that leadership or I don't like those teachings, so I'm just going to go start my own church. And that happens all the time. And that's like sand. That's like building on sand. And Jesus says, no, there's going to be this solidness that we're going to need. And if we ever abandon it, we've ventured into the sand. And anything we build on the sand is going to sink. And so we need to stay on the rock. And Peter was the one chosen to be that. I want to talk a little bit about that in terms of the context of our own lives. You know, we live in a world that's like sand. I really feel for the youth today because there's so many conflicting messages. And the youth, when they try to make decisions, they're being pulled in all these different directions. And so you have the message of the gospel and you have the message of the world. And the world is something that they get bombarded with. It's at school, it's on TV, it's in the movies, it's in music. And even in their home, their parents, I think, at least on some level, maybe are trying to give them the gospel message. But even there, it's not always really being communicated because even the parents themselves are not 100% committed. Even they struggle with the sand. You know, you could have parents who bring their kids to church and they go to catechism class, but then the parents are using birth control and they're really actually following the teachings of the world. And so you have this young adult or this youth who's trying to make decisions, but it's like quicksand. There's nothing really solid under their feet. And so I really feel for them, but that is what they need. They need something solid to grasp onto. Because that's the difference between somebody being lukewarm in the faith, where they're just kind of drifting in the sand, or they're on something really solid, and they take pride in the positive sense of their faith. And they live it, they love it, and they want to share it. They need the rock in order to do that. And so Jesus Christ desires for each of us, our soul, to be like that rock where he can build on us and build a church in the midst of our community. Now, I'm going to talk about a couple ways, that little simple things that I want to just kind of hit with regards to this. And so the first is, you know, I don't know who it was who said it, but there's an expression that in order to do anything, you first have to show up. And so he says showing up is like 90% of it. Sunday Mass. One of the most absolutely horrible statistics that we have for Catholics, at least in terms of me as a pastor and my other brother priest. 80% of Catholics do not come to Mass regularly. It's just gut-wrenching. It's so demoralizing. It's embarrassing, right? The commitment that's there. And I don't hold any one person responsible for that. I don't hold any one group responsible for that. It's just a sad state that we're in. What it's saying, though, is that we're building on sand right now. That's what we're doing. We're building on sand. People don't even come. They don't show up. And so if we want to build on rock, the first thing that we have to do as a community, as a church, is we have to show up. And so if anybody has any doubts in their minds, it is absolutely imperative, it is absolutely necessary for Jesus Christ to build his church that we show up every single Sunday. No exceptions. Nothing is more important, right? To build, we must show up. And that's absolutely critical for a parish. It's critical for the whole church. If you are a person who shows up once a month to Mass, you show up when it's convenient, you show up twice a month, you show up, here or there, or when there's that big event, you say, well, the big event, I can miss this Sunday. When we find ourselves, we are building on sand, and we are establishing sand as the foundation for our family, for the example we set for those who look up to us. We cannot do that. We must build on rock. And that means we have a priority. God comes first. I'm saying this because the people probably watching this video are probably not the ones building on sand. You're probably building on rock. The people are attending Mass every Sunday. But I'm saying this that you can share it with others, with your family members, with those who are struggling in their faith, with your coworker. Whenever there's that opportunity, and somebody says, oh yeah, I don't go to church anymore, to be able to have the courage and the conviction to say, look, when you don't come, you harm us. You harm the community. We need you there. We are not complete without you. And Jesus Christ cannot build on your soul, cannot use your soul as an instrument to build the beauty of his church if you are not showing up every single Sunday. It's necessary. People will ask me to give them dispensation from coming to Mass when they're on vacation. And I used to say yes. I wanted to be the nice guy. I used to say yes and, be charitable and say yeah. And I don't say yes anymore. Because what I found is what I'm doing is I'm helping them to build on sand. I'm helping them to say, your vacation is more important than Jesus Christ and more important than the community, more important than the church. It is not. Our vacations are never more important. They can be great instruments of rest and relaxation, and they can be spiritual, but we can never ditch Jesus on our vacations. So now I'm kind of mean, sorry. The beautiful thing about vacation, when you go to Mass somewhere else, is you become a missionary. I mean, it's not to say that everybody's going to know who you are there, but somebody may, and then you tell them and you say, oh yeah, we're on vacation and we love being able to go to churches and the different places where we're at and celebrate the Eucharist with Jesus Christ and the whole community, and to share that with the people where you're at then bolsters their faith. And then you know what you're doing? You're building on rock. It's great. I want to go a little bit deeper with it. To build on rock means more than just showing up. You need to show up, but it's more than just showing up. It's about participating. And how many times I look out over the congregation and we're singing that opening hymn, and there's people with their arms folded, the guys, they don't want to sing, they look bored already, and we've only been there 3 minutes, and it breaks your heart. And so participation is necessary. Cannot show up for Mass and not participate. And singing is part of participation. When I was growing up, I never sang at Mass. That's one of the biggest regrets in my life is how I wasted my time at Mass. How I didn't participate. I was too proud, right? And that was the example that was set for me. The people I knew, they never sang. People that were around me never sang. And that was the environment. When I attended Mass, I cannot tell you that everybody sang because they didn't. And so if I looked up to anybody at Mass, it was a roll of the dice whether or not they were participating. But I will tell you, if I went to a church where everybody was singing, I would have sang, or I at least would have felt comfortable doing it. And so that example is very important. The first time I really sang at Mass was when I showed up at the seminary. And you know the reason I started singing there? One, because everybody was singing, sounded beautiful, but also because the rector said, you have to do it. And so having that challenge to say, we're going to build on rock here. This is important. It's important that we worship God. And obviously not just with our voice, with our hearts. But if we don't even have our voice, are we ever going to do it with our heart, right? To challenge in a loving way. Everything I'm asking you to do here, if you're challenging somebody, you're doing it because you love them and you value their participation. Because when Jesus says, I need you to build on rock, I need you to be part of this, it's because of love. Being able to voice the prayers, being able to participate fully. If you struggle with distractions during Mass, get a missalette, get a book, get something that has the prayers, get something that helps you participate. But do not just allow yourself to be drifting every single Sunday here and there and not participate. For so many years in my life, I never prepared for Mass. I never took it seriously. I showed up, but I never prepared. I didn't read the readings beforehand. I didn't prepare spiritually. Prepare spiritually. If you want to get anything out of the readings, anything out of God's Word, we have to prepare spiritually. Pretend that you need to preach a homily on the readings when you come on Sunday. That'll get you to really reflect on them deeply, let me tell you. The last thing I want to talk about, there's so many things I could talk about, but the last thing is, we will never be rock unless we're in the state of grace. Unless we're living to the faith to the point of being able to not commit mortal sins in our life and to remain in the state of grace for a period of time. It's important. In marriage preparation, I'm talking to these couples more and more. It's like you have to be at Mass every single Sunday. That's what it takes to create rock, to build on rock, right? But also to be in the state of grace. If you're not married yet in the church, then not to be acting like you're married, not to be having sexual relations, because that's a mortal sin. That's a serious sin. If you're already using birth control and you're already doing those things, those are mortal sins. And so to build on rock means choosing to live your life in the state of grace. Now, we all have temptations, we all have weaknesses, but choosing to say, I will not live in a state of sin, in terms of mortal sin, grave sin. I will choose to live in the state of grace. This is very important. And so I want you to reflect on that in the context of your own life. There are some people who just continually live in sin and they don't even go to confession. There are people who bounce in and out of a state of grace constantly. They'll go to confession and then they'll go right back to a mortal sin. They'll go to confession, right back to a mortal sin. And so to be able to get in that point where I say, I will consistently stay in the state of grace. I will tell you this, there is not a single saint, there is not a single mystic in the church, St. Teresa of Avila, St. Therese, St. John of the Cross, St. Ignatius of Loyola, who will tell you or who will not tell you that in order to get to first base, in order to get to that first rung on the ladder of growing spiritually, without staying in the state of grace, it is not possible. We have to stay in the state of grace. That's part of it. Yeah, and if we fall, we go right to confession, but to consistently be staying in the state of grace is very important. And in a community, if a certain percentage of people are not doing that, if they're just showing up for Mass whenever they want to, if the commitment level is very low, if they're committing sins, mortal sins, if they're not married in the church, all these things, you know what? We're just trying to build on sand, and it doesn't work. All right. Challenge the people around you, but do it with love. Okay? All right. God bless. Take care.